It is widely accepted that Pinocchio is a Christian story, and while Del Toro's version and the original may lean in that direction, there are a great number of small visual nuances within Walt's version that suggest something broader. Classic stories often bypass the analytical mind through color, shape, and emotional intensity. They slip past the left brain and settle into the collective imagination. Disney understood this. Through the visual tools of color, shape, and emotion, Walt was doing more than retelling a Christian narrative. He was relaying a combination of spiritual narratives and symbolic threads, showing how they all point toward the same central journey, the evolution into one's highest human potential. Pinocchio's path to becoming a real boy is rightly understood as a visual teaching on living in alignment with one's own higher truth. But if you watch the Disney film strictly through a Christian lens, you end up leaving a great deal of essential symbolism on the table. When someone believes they've completed the journey and earned the final reward, but in truth they missed half the clues, they end up clinging to a narrative of success that isn't quite accurate. And because they're caught in that illusion, they never actually attain the real reward. This fixation on only one part of the journey is exactly what lands Pinocchio in Stromboli's cage. What was he missing? He said the lines. He behaved. The crowd loved him. He followed every instruction he was given. Why would these seemingly important qualities lead to such a bleak outcome? Didn't he do everything right? If only there were a preview of a visual clue that lets the viewer see what actually gets him out of Stromboli's cage. When you use just one approach to things, the complementary aspect is absent. It's lost. It's through duality that actual value is attained. Pinocchio uses dialogue through spoken language, but Walt did not forget about the language of the heart, imagery. He knew the importance of duality, and he knew the importance of trying to attain the highest potential one could. So, he left not only a story to convey that, but also a momentary scene that expresses what happens when you have the wrong perspective in the lead. You get cut off. Once Jiminy Cricket becomes Pinocchio's conscience, one of the first things he tells him to do is to give a little whistle.
And you don't know right from wrong. Give a little whistle. Give a little whistle.
Check in with your inner voice, the small, subtle voice of conscience. And the thing about a maturing conscience is that it does not play dead and roll over to whatever the masses say or what we've been trained to think. It's a quiet voice that can be drowned out, but nonetheless speaks the way to your higher self. If you're having to make a decision, Jiminy Cricket tells us to see if what you think on the outside is mirrored back to you on the inside by your conscience. The inner voice can be the ultimate guiding light in the universe, but this is challenged by the cultural atmosphere that shaped the film's era, an atmosphere in which Christian authority held a central place in public life. You see, back in 1940, when this movie was produced, the majority of Walt's world, the Western world, was morally shaped by Christianity. It was woven into many aspects of culture. Public elementary school began their day with prayer or a Bible reading. Women were encouraged to be modest and sexually pure. And men were commonly taught that they held spiritual and familial leadership. Teachings or moral narratives that seemed to fall outside Christian frameworks were sometimes viewed with suspicion. Even Walt's own father, who was described as authoritarian and deeply religious, didn't allow music, toys, or the kids to have an allowance, citing these things as potentially harmful. In the early 1900s, moral categories in the West were often seen in stark contrasts, Christian or not, right or wrong. But the thing is, Walt made himself famous through the very things that were sometimes viewed as frivolous or morally questionable. Music, toys, imagination, these are exactly what Walt is known for. And many families embrace his movies as wholesome, meaningful entertainment, to the point that they've become part of the West's cultural archive of storytelling. It's hard to find anyone who would say that the Walt Disney Company, during his lifetime, was a curse to the nation. Walt didn't become influential by simply yielding to cultural expectations. He heard the messages of his time, but he also expressed something more, something he saw in himself, in the future of film, and in the role children's stories play in our lives. No outside doctrine told him to blend these elements together and to create an empire. It came from the inside, from his own creative conscience. You see, the path to being a person is to be a unique individual shaped by your experiences, your own beliefs, and your kindness towards other. The most famous line in Pinocchio tells us,
"Prove yourself brave, truthful, and unselfish, and someday you will be a real boy."
But the thing about being unselfish is that it isn't black and white. If you're not selfish, it doesn't mean you're selfless. It simply means you don't put yourself first at the expense of others. Not that you erase yourself entirely. There's also a particular kind of bravery in choosing your own path and stepping away from the well-worn road. It's frightening to move against the crowd, to wander beyond the warmth and safety of the community. And it's even braver to be honest about why you're doing it. Being honest about why you do anything reveals you as someone who thinks for themselves rather than surrendering to recited lines of groupthink. It was especially bold to create a story that didn't just have only Christianity at the forefront, but also had little sprinklings of other ancient mythologies as well. A central thread in Pinocchio is what happens when you reach your lowest point, when everything looks bleak. In the plot, these moments appear when Pinocchio is on the verge of becoming a donkey, when he's freed from Stromboli's cage, or when he dies trying to escape Monstro. Symbolically, these scenes represent hitting the bottom of life, the moment when time seems to collapse around you. Alchemists often symbolically express this as 6 o'clock, the hands of the clock at their lowest position, marking a descent, a nadir, a true low point. Alchemists saw the descent to 6 o'clock as a necessary part of becoming whole. But when a dominant culture belief dictates how you should interpret your struggles, those low points, that inner alchemical process gets overridden by external authority. But what happens when the credit for your choices is handed over to something outside of your own life? When a culturally revered belief system is enforced so strongly that everyone is expected to walk the same path? In a world shaped by a universal convention, your own inner guidance can be pushed aside, replaced by an authority that claims to know better than your own conscience. And that raises a really symbolic question. How would a story show that when the father is in the lead, the conscience gets left out? How would it reveal that when the inner voice isn't guiding you, the path inevitably becomes rough? To answer that, the film gives us a quiet but deliberate visual sequence that shows exactly what happens when external authority steps ahead of inner guidance. At the beginning, once Pinocchio has become a real boy and they're celebrating, there's a specific clock that I'd like to draw your attention to. Jiminy Cricket turns the clock to the 6 o'clock position and is then seen happily in the lead. We have the father symbolizing the Western culture moral narrative. We have it placed in a line in the front. Once Jiminy Cricket is replaced by the father as the leader, Jiminy Cricket is ultimately left out. Because 6 o'clock, hard times will always come, and the way we get into alignment with our higher self is through pure ownership, not outsourcedship. This ownership gives us confidence, faith, and trust that we are competent. We can keep ourselves on our unique selective path, and that our guide is nicely found when we give a little whistle to the inside. In the end, Walt's Pinocchio isn't a story about obedience to an external doctrine, nor is it a simple morality tale dressed in Christian clothing. It is a visual meditation on what it means to become a real person, someone guided not by inherited authority, but by the quiet, persistent truth of their own conscience. Walt used